We live in an age that feels defined by digital permanence, an era saturated with the comforting, yet perhaps deceptive, belief that nothing is ever truly gone. We are told, and we mostly accept, that every photograph we take, every casual message we send, every fleeting thought we type into a search bar is meticulously archived, duplicated, and stored on a distant, humming Cervera digital ghost that can be summoned back into existence with just a few clicks. Our culture feels solid, recorded, indexed, and indestructible. We imagine the great, sprawling library of human creativity as an impregnable fortress, its walls growing higher and thicker every day, its infinite contents safe for all time. But this feeling of permanence is a very new and a very fragile illusion. For the vast majority of human history, the absolute opposite was true. Art was ephemeral, a fleeting performance whispered on the wind. Music was a communal experience that existed only in the moment of its creation, carried forward only by the fallible and distorting vessel of human memory. And even in the age of mechanical reproduction, the revolutionary eras of film, of television, of radio, our most cherished cultural artifacts were shockingly vulnerable. They were physical objects, corporeal things, susceptible to the ravages of fire, to the slow, creeping rot of neglect, to the simple, brutal, and inexorable chemistry of decay. This is a story about the ghosts that haunt that great library. Not the fictional ghosts depicted in the stories, but the ghosts of the stories themselves. This is the world of lost media. It is a shadowy realm of cultural phantoms. Feature films that no one alive has ever seen, television broadcasts that vanished into the ether the moment they aired, musical recordings that exist only as a tantalizing rumor in a faded magazine article. These are not just missing items on a collector's checklist. They are gaping holes in our shared cultural history, tantalizing voids that spark a unique and profound kind of mystery. The search for lost media is a strange and compelling discipline, a unique blend of dogged detective work, meticulous historical archaeology, and a deep, almost spiritual, communal yearning to reclaim what has been taken by the relentless passage of time. Today, we are embarking on a ghost hunt. We will explore the labyrinthine stories behind some of the most sought-after, enigmatic, and culturally significant pieces of lost media. Our journey will take us back to the flickering, monochromatic dreamscape of silent Hollywood, a time of gods and monsters, as we search for what is often considered the holy grail of lost horror films, a movie whose surviving images have haunted the nightmares of cinema lovers for nearly a century, the legendary London After Midnight. And from there, we will travel forward in time, descending into the uncanny valley of children's television programming, to investigate a short, terrifying, and deeply surreal claymation film that traumatized a generation of schoolchildren across the globe before disappearing so completely that many of its viewers began to doubt their own memories, their own sanity. The strange and unsettling case of Clockman. This is a journey into the empty archives, a search for the faint, lingering echoes of art that no longer exists. It is an exploration of loss, of memory, and of the profound question of why these missing pieces of our past continue to haunt our present so powerfully. Let us begin our search in the 1920s, the golden age of the silent film, a chaotic and revolutionary period in Hollywood. It was a time of flickering nitrate film stock, of opulent movie palaces, and of stars whose expressive faces, unadorned by dialogue, made them global icons. And perhaps no star of that era was larger, more mysterious, or more artistically audacious than Lon Chaney. Born to deaf parents, Chaney learned from a young age to communicate through pantomime, body language, and expressive facial contortions. This upbringing gave him a physical vocabulary that would make him a master of nonverbal performance. He became known to a mesmerized public as the Man of 1,000 Faces, a title that was not mere hyperbole. He was a character actor of unparalleled, almost frightening genius. Using revolutionary and often excruciatingly painful, self-devised makeup techniques, he could physically and psychologically contort himself into some of cinema's most iconic and deeply pathetic monsters. He was the tortured, twisted Quasimodo in the 1923 epic The Hunchback of Notre Dame, weighed down by a 50-pound prosthetic hump and a harness that bound his limbs. He was the skeletal, skull-faced Eric, the Phantom in 1925's The Phantom of the Opera, a role for which he created his own horrifying makeup, using cotton, collodion, and fish skin, and famously using wires to painfully pull back his own nose and cheeks to create the illusion of a living skull. His ability to evoke both abject terror and profound, heart-wrenching pathos from behind these layers of putty and paint made him one of the biggest and most respected box office draws of the decade. In 1927, at the absolute zenith of his fame and creative power, Chaney embarked on another collaboration with his frequent director, the brilliant but deeply morbid Todd Browning. Browning was a filmmaker drawn to the grotesque, the outcast, and the macabre. He was a man who had run away to join the circus as a young boy, and that fascination with the strange world of the sideshow would inform his entire career. Together, Chaney and Browning were a formidable force in silent horror, and in 1927 they created a film that would become one of the most legendary and mysterious productions of their careers. The film was London After Midnight. The story, based on an original scenario by Todd Browning himself titled The Hypnotist, was a classic Gothic mystery, a clever and commercial blend of a detective procedural and a supernatural horror story. The plot unfolds in a stately, shadowy old manor in London, 5 years after its owner, the wealthy Roger Balfour, was found dead in his library from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound. His death is officially ruled a suicide, but a cloud of suspicion and unease hangs over the affair. As the years pass, this unease blossoms into outright terror. New tenants who move into the Balfour Manor report seeing ghostly, unsettling figures haunting the halls at night. These apparitions, described as vampiric and ghoulish, bear a striking and terrifying resemblance to the deceased Roger Balfour. The sightings become so frequent and so disturbing that the local police are baffled, and Scotland Yard is called in to investigate the seemingly supernatural case. They send their best man, the pragmatic and eccentric Inspector Edward C. Burke. And this is where the genius of Lon Chaney's casting comes into play. He plays a demanding dual role. He is both the ostensibly rational, pipe-smoking Inspector Burke, and he is also the primary suspect, the ghoulish, otherworldly, vampiric figure seen haunting the mansion. This vampire, known in the script and publicity materials as the Man in the Beaver Hat, is one of the most visually arresting and profoundly terrifying creations of Chaney's entire career. The surviving production stills, which are now all that remain of his performance, are the stuff of pure, undiluted nightmares. In these photos, we see a man who seems to have crawled from the grave. He has a shock of wild, unkempt hair rising from his scalp like weeds in a cemetery. His complexion is a pale, corpse-like white. His eyes are wide, dark, and hypnotic, sunken deep into his skull, made to look like black voids through the use of special celluloid shells Chaney wore over his own eyes. But the centerpiece of this horrifying visage is the smile. It is a wide, predatory, inhuman grin, filled with a jagged, chaotic row of sharpened, shark-like teeth. This effect was achieved with a set of painful dentures made from sharpened animal gut that Chaney wedged into his own mouth. He wears a tall, formal beaver hat and a dark, flowing cape, an otherworldly aristocrat of the London night. This single image Chaney's horrifying, predatory grin frozen in a black and white still has become one of the most iconic and influential images in the entire history of horror cinema, even though the film in which it appeared is gone forever. The plot of London After Midnight involves Inspector Burke using unorthodox methods to solve the case. He employs hypnosis and elaborate psychological tricks to probe the minds of the various suspects who were present in the house on the night of Balfour's death. These include Balfour's beautiful daughter, Lucille, his loyal butler, Williams, and his ambitious neighbor, Sir James Hamlin, played by the prominent silent film actor Conrad Nagel. Burke's ultimate strategy is to become the horror, to manifest the very ghost that is haunting the mansion. He appears in the full, terrifying guise of the vampire to terrorize the suspects, believing that by confronting them with a supernatural terror, he can break down the psychological defenses of the real murderer and force a confession. The film culminates in a shocking twist ending, a device for which Todd Browning was famous. It is revealed that the vampire is not a supernatural creature at all. The hauntings, the ghoulish appearance, the ghostly sightings, it was all an elaborate, brilliant charade, a piece of psychological theater orchestrated by Inspector Burke. The final reel reveals that the true killer is Sir James Hamlin, the respectable neighbor. Burke proves that Hamlin used his own powerful hypnotic abilities to command the weak-willed Roger Balfour to commit suicide. Hamlin's motive was greed. As the executor of Balfour's estate and the guardian of his daughter Lucille, he stood to gain control of the entire Balfour fortune. In the film's climax, Burke's terrifying performance as the vampire shatters Hamlin's composure, and he confesses everything. The mystery is solved not by supernatural means, but by a masterful manipulation of human fear. London After Midnight was a massive commercial success. It was released in December of 1927 and, on a budget of just over $150,000, it grossed nearly $500,000 for its studio, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, or MGM, a very significant profit for the time. It was one of the most successful and profitable collaborations between Lon Chaney and Todd Browning. The critical reviews, however, were mixed, a common occurrence for horror films of the era. Some critics found the plot convoluted and that it was all a hoax, ending to be a cheat, a letdown after the promise of a genuine supernatural tale. The New York Times dismissed it as a weird and uncanny production, but found the story none too convincing. But even the harshest critics had nothing but praise for Lon Chaney's terrifying and transformative performance. Variety magazine wrote, "Chaney's makeup in this instance is grotesque and his acting is in keeping with the awesomeness of the story." The film was a certified hit, another jewel in the crown of Hollywood's greatest monster. In 1935, 8 years after its release, MGM decided to remake the film as a sound picture, a talkie. The resulting film, Mark of the Vampire, also directed by Todd Browning, starred Bela Lugosi in a role very similar to Chaney's. It followed a nearly identical plot, including the twist ending revealing the vampires to be actors hired by the police. While Mark of the Vampire is now considered a minor classic in its own right, its existence suggests that by the mid-1930s, MGM already considered its silent predecessor, London After Midnight, to be an obsolete property. This was a common attitude among studios during the transition to sound. The silent films were yesterday's news. And then, at some point in the following decades, the original film vanished from the face of the earth. To understand how a film this famous, this successful, starring one of the biggest movie stars in the world, could simply disappear, we need to understand the fragile physical nature of early cinema. Films in the silent era, and indeed up until the early 1950s, were shot and printed on cellulose nitrate film stock. From an artistic standpoint, nitrate was a brilliant medium. It had a luminous, silvery, almost three-dimensional quality that modern polyester safety film stock struggle to replicate. But it had a terrible, fatal flaw. It was incredibly, dangerously flammable. Nitrate film contains its own oxidizing agents, meaning that once it ignites, it does not need oxygen to burn. Can burn underwater. It is, For all intents and purposes, a solid propellant, closer in chemical composition to gunpowder than to modern photographic film. And it gets worse. As nitrate film ages, it begins to inexorably decompose. This process releases nitric acid, which causes the film to become sticky, then brittle, and eventually to crumble into a fine, brown, and highly flammable powder. This decaying film can also spontaneously combust. A can of decomposing nitrate film, sitting on a shelf, can generate enough internal heat to simply burst into flame without any external ignition source. Early film archives were not the climate-controlled, scientifically managed vaults of today. They were fire traps, ticking time bombs waiting to go off. For decades, the last known complete print of London After Midnight was stored in MGM's Vault 7. This was the studio's primary archive for its vast and priceless library of silent films. The vault, located on the studio's backlit in Culver City, California, was a massive, concrete structure, believed to be the state-of-the-art in film preservation at the time. But on the afternoon of May 13, 1965, a fire broke out inside Vault 7. The exact cause is still debated among historians. Some reports say it was an electrical short that ignited a decomposing film. Others suggest it was a pure case of spontaneous combustion of old nitrate stock. Whatever the cause, the result was a cultural catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. The fire raged through the vault with incredible speed and intensity, consuming hundreds upon hundreds of unique, irreplaceable silent and early sound films. The heat was so immense that it buckled the massive steel and concrete structure of the vault itself. When the fire was finally, heroically, extinguished, the vault was a blackened ruin. And inside that ruin, the last known complete print of London After Midnight, along with countless other lost treasures, was gone, turned to ash, smoke, and dust. With it vanished the only moving record of Lon Chaney's legendary performance as the man in the beaver hat. The true severity of this loss was not immediately understood by the public, or even by the studio. In the mid-1960s, silent films were not widely valued. They were seen as quaint, old-fashioned, artistically crude relics of a bygone era. Many studios, including MGM, simply did not see the commercial value in preserving them, and some even intentionally destroyed their silent film libraries to clear out storage space. It was only later, as film history became a serious academic discipline and a new generation of filmmakers and cinephiles began to appreciate the artistry of the silent era, that the true scale of the Vault 7 fire tragedy became clear. An entire era of cinema, an entire wing of our cultural library, had been incinerated. And London After Midnight, because of its famous star, its legendary director, and its tantalizingly horrifying still photos, became the poster child for this catastrophic loss. It became the holy grail of lost films. The search for a surviving print has been a global, decades-long, and largely fruitless quest. The hope, the faint glimmer that keeps the search alive, is that the copy in Vault 7 was not the only copy. In the silent era, multiple prints of a popular film were struck and distributed to theaters all around the world. It is theoretically possible, however unlikely, that a forgotten 35mm print is sitting in a dusty, mislabeled can in a foreign archive, perhaps in South America, in Eastern Europe, or in Australia, places where film distribution networks were robust but archival practices were less centralized. Hope has flickered over the years. Rumors have emerged from the film collecting underground of a private collector in Cuba who allegedly owned a copy, or a forgotten state-run archive in Egypt that might hold a print. But none of these leads have ever borne fruit. To this day, despite the tireless efforts of archivists and enthusiasts, not a single frame of moving footage from London After Midnight is known to exist. So what are we left with? We are left with a ghost. We have the original shooting script, which allows us to know the story, scene by scene. We have the production stills, those haunting black and white images that promise a masterpiece of atmospheric horror. We have the critical reviews and the box office receipts that tell us it was real, that it existed, that it was seen and reacted to by millions of people. And we even have a remarkable reconstruction of the film, created in 2002 by the producer and preservationist Rick Schmidlin for the Turner Classic Movies Network. Using the original script, a musical score composed by Robert Israel, and a carefully edited, meticulously timed sequence of the surviving still photographs, Schmidlin created a 45-minute static version of the film that gives us a sense of the story's narrative flow. It is a brilliant and invaluable piece of historical archaeology, but it is not the film. It cannot replicate the movement, the pacing, the atmosphere, the spectral terror of a performance. It cannot show us Lon Chaney's horrifying, shark-toothed smile in motion. The enduring mystery of London After Midnight is not a mystery of what happened to the film. We know with near certainty that it burned in the MGM vault fire. The true mystery is what, exactly, we lost in those flames. Was it a genuine masterpiece of horror? A crowning achievement for both Chaney and Browning that would be spoken of today in the same breath as Nosferatu or the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari? Or was it, as some of its contemporary critics suggested, a somewhat silly, convoluted mystery with a disappointing anticlimactic ending, a film elevated only by a single brilliant, grotesque performance and a masterful makeup job? Without the film, we can never know for sure. It exists forever in a state of quantum superposition, both a masterpiece and a disappointment at the same time, its quality dependent entirely on the imagination of the person considering it. Its lost status has, ironically, cemented its legacy far more powerfully and enduringly than if it had survived. Had it survived, it would be another silent horror film, perhaps a classic, perhaps a curiosity. But in its absence, it has become a legend, a myth. The man in the beaver hat is more famous and more terrifying as a single, static image than he might ever have been as a moving picture. The emptiness where the film should be acts as a perfect canvas, allowing our imaginations to fill in the blanks, to project our own deepest fears onto that jagged, predatory grin. We have all become the directors of our own internal version of London After Midnight, and in the theater of our minds, it is always the scariest movie ever made. The search for a surviving print continues, a faint, flickering hope held by a dedicated community of collectors and archivists around the world. But for now, Lon Chaney's ghoulish vampire remains trapped in the amber of a handful of still photographs, a silent, smiling ghost from a lost world of cinema. From the grand, gothic horror of Hollywood's silent era, we now travel forward several decades in time, and across the Atlantic, to a very different, and in some ways, far more unsettling world of media. This is the world of children's television in the latter half of the 20th century. Specifically, we are going to look at a unique and often bizarre genre of filmmaking known as the public information film, or PIF. These were short films, often animations, produced or commissioned by government bodies to educate the public, and particularly children, about various societal dangers. There were PIFs about the dangers of playing near power lines, crossing the street without looking, flying kites near electricity pylons, or talking to strangers. And in the United Kingdom, these films, which were shown in schools and aired on television between other children's programs, were famous for being absolutely bone-chillingly terrifying. The philosophy seemed to be that the best way to impart a safety message was through sheer, unadulterated trauma. They used unsettling, often surreal imagery, eerie, dissonant electronic music, and stark, brutal narratives to traumatize children into remembering their safety message. And they were brutally effective. And within this strange, forgotten genre of state-sanctioned childhood nightmare fuel, there is one film that has become a true legend of lost media. It is a short, surreal, and deeply philosophical claymation film that aired in schools and on television in the UK and other parts of the world. including the United States and Canada, sometime between the late 1970s and the early 1980s. The film is known only by the name of its terrifying, existential antagonist, Clockman. The search for Clockman is a fundamentally different kind of lost media mystery than the search for London After Midnight. We know the latter existed. We have the script, the stars, the studio records, the box office receipts. Its existence is a historical fact. The mystery of Clockman, for many years, was more fundamental, more ghostly. For decades, its very existence was a matter of intense debate. It was a shared memory, a collective trauma that festered in the minds of thousands of people who had been children in the 70s and 80s. But for years, there was absolutely no physical proof that it was real. It was a ghost in the machine of human memory, a story that many of its viewers began to believe they had simply dreamed up. The people who remembered Clockman all described a very similar and very specific viewing experience. The film, they recalled, was a short claymation or stop-motion animation. It began, they all agreed, with a young girl sitting on a park bench at night. She is alone. Suddenly, a strange, clock-like figure emerges from the darkness behind her. This figure, the Clockman, is the source of the collective terror. Descriptions of him varied slightly in the details, as memories often do, but the core elements were remarkably consistent across hundreds of accounts. He was a tall, menacing, and unnaturally thin figure. His face was a large, white, blank clock face, with moving hands but no other features, no eyes, no nose, no mouth. Some remembered him having a pointed, conical hat, like a wizard or a dunce. He moved with a jerky, unnatural, and deeply unsettling stop-motion gait. The Clockman approaches the young, innocent girl on the bench and speaks to her. His voice, as remembered, was deep, booming, resonant, and deeply sinister. And what he says to her is the key to the film's educational purpose and its existential horror. He tells the girl, in some remembered versions, "Time runs out." In other versions, he introduces himself as the time thief. The hands on his clock face begin to spin faster and faster, a blur of motion. The musical score, already eerie, becomes more frantic, dissonant, and frightening. The entire scene, which was already dreamlike, dissolves into a vortex of surreal, abstract, terrifying imagery. The girl is shown aging rapidly, her face wrinkling, her hair turning gray, her life flashing by in a few terrifying seconds. The film's message was a brutal, stark, existential warning about wasting time, about the preciousness of life, and about the absolute, terrifying inevitability of death. It was a memento mori for 7-year-olds. After this terrifying, psychedelic encounter with mortality, the film would end abruptly, leaving a classroom full of young children in a state of stunned silence, shock, and newfound existential dread. For years, decades even, this shared memory, this collective cultural scar, was all that existed of Clockman. People would post on nascent internet forums in the late 1990s and early 2000s, tentatively asking, "Does anyone else remember this terrifying cartoon from school about a man with a clock for a face who told a girl that time runs out?" A chorus of voices from around the world would reply, "Yes, I remember that. It terrified me. I thought I was the only one. What was it called?" But no one knew the title. No one knew who made it. No one could find a copy. It was a ghost that haunted a generation. The search became a classic case of what is now often referred to as the Mandela effect, the phenomenon where a large group of people seems to collectively misremember the same detail or event. Many people, including some of those who vividly remembered being scared by it, began to wonder if Clockman was real at all. Was it a shared nightmare? A piece of creepypasta before the term existed? Was it a composite memory of several different scary children's programs from that era? The complete lack of any physical evidence was maddening. How could a film that was apparently shown to so many children in so many schools in so many countries disappear so completely, leaving no trace behind? The dedicated community of lost media hunters, centered around online hubs like the Lost Media Wiki forums, took up the case as one of their most intriguing challenges. They were a new breed of digital detectives, and they began to meticulously piece together the clues from the fog of memory. They compiled hundreds of eyewitness accounts, cross-referencing details, trying to narrow down the time frame and the possible production companies. The breakthrough came when researchers began to look beyond television archives and started digging into the dusty, forgotten world of educational film catalogs from the 1970s and 80s. These were the thick paper catalogs that schools and libraries used to order 16mm film strips and projectors for classroom use. And in one of these catalogs, a researcher found it. A listing for a short animated film from 1976. It was produced by the National Film Board of Canada, or NFBC, a prolific and highly respected creator of animated and documentary films, known for its artistic and often experimental approach. The film was listed with its original French-language title, Le Voleur de Temps, which translates to the Thief of Time, and in the English-language section of the catalog, it was listed as Clockman. The discovery was monumental. It was the first piece of concrete, physical, verifiable evidence that the film was real. The name was a perfect match. The production year, 1976, fit perfectly within the time frame remembered by the viewers. And the production company, the NFBC, was known for producing thoughtful, artistic, and sometimes deeply surreal animated shorts. The community was ecstatic. They had a title. They had a producer. They had a year. Now, they just needed to find a copy of the film itself. They contacted the National Film Board of Canada directly. And here, the story takes a frustrating, bureaucratic turn. The NFBC acknowledged that they had indeed produced a film with that title. They had it in their internal records. But they did not have a copy available in their public-facing archive or for commercial sale. For some reason, Clockman was not available for viewing or purchase. The official reasons for this remain murky. Perhaps the distribution rights had expired and reverted to the original animator. Perhaps the film was intentionally withdrawn from circulation due to its unsettling and psychologically distressing content. Whatever the reason, the official source, the film's own creator, was a dead end. But the lost media community is nothing if not persistent. Knowing for certain that the film was real, the hunt intensified. It became a digital scavenger hunt. They scoured online auction sites like eBay for 16mm prints. They sent inquiries to university film archives and private collectors. And then, in the mid-2010s, after years of searching, it finally happened. A user on a forum claimed to have a copy. They had recorded it off a television broadcast on a VHS tape many, many years ago. After a period of verification to ensure it wasn't a hoax, the footage was digitized and uploaded to YouTube for the world to see. For the first time in decades, the people who had been haunted by the memory of the Clockman could see him again. And the film was exactly as everyone had remembered it. It was real. The uploaded version is a short, 2-minute film. The animation style is a unique and beautiful kind of clay-on-glass animation, where colored clay is manipulated on a backlit pane of glass, giving it a constantly shifting, morphing, dreamlike quality. It opens, exactly as remembered, with a young girl in a blue dress sitting on a park bench. She is blowing bubbles, a perfect image of childhood innocence and the ephemeral nature of the moment. A strange, tall figure emerges from behind a tree. It is the Clockman. He is a tall, thin figure in a dark suit and a pointed hat. His head is a blank, white clock face with furiously spinning hands. He approaches the girl and, in a deep, resonant, and slightly melancholic voice, he says, "You have a question?" The girl asks him what he does. The clockman gestures to the world around them and replies, "I am a time thief. I bring the future." The musical score then swells from a gentle, lilting tune into a frantic, jazzy, and deeply unsettling crescendo. The clockman begins to dance, a manic, jerky, almost convulsive waltz. As he dances, the background shifts and morphs around them. We see the girl and the clockman dancing through the seasons. The leaves of the trees turn from green to orange and fall. The ground is covered in snow. Flowers bloom in the spring, and the hot sun shines in the summer. And at each stage of this frantic dance through time, the girl is seen aging. We see her as a teenager, then a young woman, then a mother holding a child, and finally, as a stooped, gray-haired old woman. The final, haunting image shows the old woman sitting alone on the park bench, as the clockman tips his hat to her in a final, gentlemanly gesture, and recedes back into the darkness from which he came. The film ends. Watching it now, it is profoundly easy to see why it left such a deep and terrifying mark on a generation of children. It is a work of pure, unfiltered existentialism. It is a beautiful, melancholic, and deeply frightening meditation on the passage of time, the loss of innocence, and the finality of life. It's not a film about a monster who is going to hurt you. It's a film about a fundamental, inescapable, and terrifying truth that will happen to you. And for a child whose perception of time is almost infinite, whose life feels like it will last forever, to be confronted so starkly and so surrealistically with their own mortality is a deeply traumatic and unforgettable experience. The discovery and recovery of Clockman is a major victory for the lost media community and a powerful testament to the value of their work. It is a case where the collective memory, the ghost that so many people shared, was proven right. The monster was real, but its recovery also leaves a few lingering threads of mystery. The version that was found and uploaded is the original French-language version, Le Voleur de Temps. The clockman speaks French. Many of the people who remember the film, particularly in the UK and the US, vividly remember him speaking English with a deep, booming English voice. It is almost certain that an English-language dub was created for international distribution. While we have the visuals and the story, this English-language version, the one that lives precisely in the memories of so many, remains technically lost. The story of Clockman is a powerful testament to the power and the fallibility of human memory. It shows how a piece of media, especially one experienced at a young and impressionable age, can lodge itself in the psyche and become a personal piece of folklore. The search for it was not just about finding a forgotten cartoon. It was about validating a shared childhood experience. It was about thousands of people proving to themselves that they weren't crazy, that the monster they remembered from that darkened classroom was not just a bad dream. So we have two very different but equally compelling kinds of lost media. London After Midnight, a certified blockbuster, a lost masterpiece from a Hollywood legend, destroyed by a catastrophic physical fire, its very absence creating a legend more powerful than the film itself might have been. And Clockman, a small, obscure, artistic educational film that was not so much destroyed as simply forgotten, neglected by the very institutions that created and distributed it, its existence kept alive only by the faint, persistent, and traumatic echo of childhood fear. These are just two stories from a vast and ever-growing field of cultural archaeology. The world of lost media is filled with countless other ghosts, each with its own tragic, frustrating, and fascinating story. There is the legendary spider pit sequence from the original 1933 King Kong, a scene so terrifying that it was cut from the film after test audiences reportedly fled the theater screaming or fainted in their seats, and the excised footage was then subsequently and tragically lost. There is the BBC's 1965 television adaptation of the classic sci-fi epic Dune, which predates the famous David Lynch film by nearly 2 decades, and of which no footage is known to survive. There are 97 lost episodes of the classic British sci-fi series, Doctor Who, wiped by the BBC in the 1960s and 70s in a short-sighted policy of recycling expensive videotape to save storage space. There is the original, much longer director's cut of Orson Welles' masterpiece The Magnificent Ambersons, which was taken from him by the studio while he was out of the country, brutally edited by a committee, and the excised footage was then melted down to extract its silver nitrate content. Each of these, and thousands more, is a hole in our culture, a missing piece of our shared story. The search for these lost artifacts is more than just a hobby for dedicated collectors. It is a vital act of cultural preservation. It is a race against time, against the chemical decay of physical media, and against the fading of human memory. The people who search for lost media are the ghost hunters for our collective past. They are driven by the profound belief that these stories, these images, these sounds matter. They are part of the vast, complex, and beautiful tapestry of human creativity, and every thread that is lost diminishes the whole. The digital age has not solved this problem. It has simply changed its nature. It is far less likely that a modern film or television show will be lost to a physical fire in the same way as London after midnight. Digital files can be copied infinitely without any degradation. But a new, more insidious kind of loss has emerged. The loss of access. A show might exist on a streaming service's private server, but if that service goes defunct, or if it decides to remove the content for financial or tax purposes, has happened recently with major streaming giants like HBO Max and Disney Plus, that media becomes effectively lost to the public. It exists, but it is inaccessible, a ghost behind a corporate firewall. Its fate decided not by artists or archivists, but by accountants. The stories of London after midnight and Clockman are, in the end, cautionary tales. They remind us that our culture is not guaranteed. It is not permanent. It must be actively and intentionally preserved, cared for, and shared. They remind us that the ghosts of lost media are not just historical curiosities. They are warnings. They are a call to action for all of us to be better librarians, better archivists, and better storytellers, to ensure that the creative works of our time do not become the forgotten legends and the haunting mysteries of the future. If this journey into the lost archives of our culture has sparked your curiosity, if you find yourself haunted by the stories that are no longer with us, consider subscribing to this channel for more explorations into the forgotten corners of history and art. Click the notification bell so you don't miss our next investigation. And now, I invite you to share your own stories in the comments. Is there a piece of lost media that haunts you? A half-remembered cartoon from your childhood? A movie you saw once and could never find again? A song you heard on the radio that seems to have vanished from existence? The search is a collective effort, and sometimes, the most important clue is not in a dusty archive, but hidden away in someone else's memory. Let's see what ghosts we can find together.